Welcome to the award-winning Superhuman Academy podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to give you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
This episode is brought to you by Blue Blocks. Blue and green light is destroying our sleep, hormones, and performance, and that's why it's important to wear blue light blocking glasses. But did you know that all blue light glasses aren't created equal? I personally have started wearing Blue Blocks blue light blocking glasses, as they are the only blue light blocking company in the world that create evidence-backed lenses for filtering blue and green light. Their Australian lab-built lens technology is fitted into the most fashionable frames, and they even can make prescription and reading glasses in their optics lab. Whether it's their Sleep Plus glasses that block 100% of blue and green light, their Summer Glow mood booster glasses, or their blue light computer glasses, Blue Blocks has you covered. I wear my Sleep Plus glasses 2 to 3 hours before bed, and my sleep has never been better, and I feel so well rested. The daytime ones are also great at reducing digital eye strain, headaches, and lowering stress. With free and fast worldwide shipping using code SUPERHUMAN at checkout, now is an amazing time to level up your sleep and eye health. Just go to blueblocks.com, that's BLUBLOX.com, and enter code SUPERHUMAN to save 15%. Greetings, Super Friends, and welcome to this week's episode, where we are joined by Dr. Ben Lynch, best-selling author of Dirty Genes and a leader in the field of nutrigenomics. He's also president of Seeking Health, an innovative company providing supplements, courses, and tools designed to help people overcome genetic dysfunction and optimize health. After earning his Bachelor's of Science in Cell and Molecular Biology, he then obtained a Doctorate of Naturopathic Medicine, and he now serves on the Board of Trustees at Bastyr University. He also lives in Seattle, Washington, with his 3 sons. Now, I wanted to have Dr. Lynch on the show, not because we haven't talked about genetics a lot recently. We actually have been talking, and I've been trying to talk a lot about genetics and the fact that we can influence how our genes are expressed. No, the reason that I wanted to have him on was he has a very contrarian approach and a lot of really, really new and fresh, exciting advice that I think you're all going to enjoy very much. I really enjoyed this episode. I actually ran over the amount of time that I said I would, and that doesn't always happen. So please enjoy this episode with Dr. Ben Lynch. Dr. Ben Lynch, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you?
Great, Jonathan.
I'm really happy to finally connect. I think you and I connected through Genius Network, if I'm not mistaken.
It was either Genius Network or it was Michael Fishman at Consumer Health Summit.
Yep. So shout out to Michael Fishman, our fellow Genius Network member, and really looking forward to learning more about nutrigenomics. Lately, I've been really interested in epigenetics and just understanding how much control we have. I mean, my word, if you remember the words that they had us wear at Genius Network on the bracelets, my word is empowerment. And I believe it is probably one of the most empowering things a person can learn, to discover genetics is not fate, and rather that we can influence our health and our life's outcomes through simple stuff. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you today.
Beautiful. Man, you making me feel guilty here. It's like, God, what is my word? And I love empowerment. A bunch of words came through my head, and strategic is one. Mm-hmm. Empowerment is another. Grateful another. Because they do switch on you.
Yeah.
For the sake of this interview, let's say strategic is my word.
I love it. So I try to cover your background, your illustrious background at that a little bit in the intro, but I always like to give guests an opportunity to tell it in their words, especially folks who do as many different things as the average guest on this show does. So when people ask, what do you do? What do you answer? And how did you get to a point that was the answer?
I love being able to dive down and help people understand the unexplainable. And to me, that is very empowering, because people see that and experience it, and then they get excited about learning because they applied it to their own life and they experienced success. And then once you experience success, you become, driven to go for more. So that's what I really enjoy. How I got into all this, boy, I grew up in a cow town. Literally, I grew up in a town of population, the poorest town in Oregon. It's called Prineville. And on that horse ranch, we had 40 some horses and 100 acres. And I learned a work ethic. I would be tending to the horses and shoveling horse crap for hours on end and bucking hay and so on. So I learned a work ethic. And then I went to college and joined the rowing team. And when I was trying out for the rowing team, you had to get a physical. And I was 19 years old, and they took my blood pressure, and it was like, no kidding, John, it was like 160 over 90. And I'm 19, and it should be like 120 over 60, 120 over 70 at that age, 120 over 60 ideally. Yes. And they looked at me and were like, well, this isn't good. And so that was kind of a strike one. I was 19 and unhealthy. And then I had chronic nosebleeds as a kid, all the time. I had horrible acne. I was brilliant at homework and typical learning stuff. But when it came to test taking, I would freak out and panic and do horribly on tests. And I just kind of had failure after failure and chronic issues that were nagging at me. And then when I was in India, kind of wrapped all this up. When I was in India, I got really sick in Jaipur, and I went to this guy in a white coat in a concrete hole and off the street that was directed to me by a guy that I met off the street, a local East Indian. And the guy took my pulse in a weird way, and then he had me stick out my tongue and look at that. And then he started writing in Hindi a bunch of words that I couldn't understand, and told me to go to the store next to him and buy a bunch of herbs. And I crap. How does he know what's wrong with me by doing just that? And that introduced me to Ayurveda and natural medicine, and the rest is history. Here I am, focused in it, knee deep.
Wow, incredible. And so how have you balanced, because it sounds like you were exposed, was that you were relatively young when you were in India?
Yeah, I was at the end of my junior year at the University of Washington. I pulled myself out of school because I changed my major, like, no kidding, like 6 times. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to be in school forever. I just didn't know what I wanted. And I was frustrated, and I just kind of was lost. And I was working with a landscape construction firm here in Seattle, and all the guys on the team were basically internationals, and they all talked about traveling the world at different places and their different experiences at lunchtime. And I just kept hearing this for months after months, for months. And they inspired me to be brave and go, and I did.
So cool. So when you came back, you decided to study medicine and study cell and molecular biology. So tell me a little bit about that process of integrating the experience that you had of the Eastern medicine and what you were learning in the classroom with Western medicine, or I should say Western science.
When I came back, I knew I wanted to do something with natural health, but I didn't know how to do it. And so I went to the counselor and I said, okay, here are the classes I've taken so far. How do I get out of here the fastest? And they said, well, you do cell and molecular biology and you'll get out of here the fastest. And I was like, okay, done. And I was focused on pre-med because I wanted to do some type of medicine, but I didn't want to do traditional medicine. I didn't want the medications because those failed me. I left a lot of stories out on those. And I didn't want to go that route. I didn't want surgery because I was scared of high pressure situations. And I didn't want to hurt anybody or kill anyone. I knew I couldn't handle the stress of surgery. So I was kind of lost. So I did the cell and molecular biology. I absolutely despised my last year because I realized that college is just you sitting in a chair and being lectured at and told what to study and what to do. And it drove me crazy. I literally couldn't stand it, where I was on the road traveling for a year in Southeast Asia and South Pacific, and you had to constantly think and get yourself out of sticky situations constantly. But at university, you're not taught to think. You're taught to memorize and regurgitate. And that's what most doctors do. They're told what to memorize, and if they're good at regurgitating, they become a doctor. And that's scary. Doctors need to think. So after graduating, I walked out of the door and I literally said, okay, I'm done. Now what? And I just kept landscaping for another 6 years because I did not know what to specialize in. I didn't want to do Ayurveda because I wanted to be some type of primary care health professional, and Ayurveda was not going to allow me to do that. Eventually, I discovered naturopathic medicine in Bastyr University. Was literally 15 minutes from my house, and applied there, got in, and now I'm an ND.
How old were you at that point?
I was 29, I believe.
It's very inspiring to, I think, a lot of people who think that you have to have it all figured out when you're 22 years old.
Oh, and my landscape company, Jonathan, was quite successful. We were doing very high-end jobs. I had my own business. I was already making well into six figures in my early 20s. I could take the entire winter off and travel. I had, big equipment, dump trucks and other trucks and great crew. And I remember when I stepped off an excavator one day, I couldn't breathe. I literally was standing vertically and I could not inhale. It felt like I had a elephant on the front of my chest and behind me. I was pinned between two elephants, and I just stood there, and my employees were talking to me, and I just looked at them and I couldn't do anything. And I was like, oh my God. So that was a strike, high stress situation for me. That's where my MTGFR probably kicked in. And then I said, okay, I started not enjoying what I was doing. I would take shortcuts. If I made a bad cut with the wood, or, I didn't plant the tree quite right, or I didn't use dig the hole deep enough, I was just like, oh, that's good enough. And once I started noticing that, I knew I wasn't happy and I had to get out. And my dad was pissed at me when I told him I was going to get out of landscaping. He goes, you're making a great living. You're making good money. I said, but I'm not happy. He goes, so what? I was like, no, that's the most important thing to me, is being happy.
Good for you. So tell me a bit about this journey, because naturopathic medicine, I think, is a lot more open. I would say fully open to Eastern medicine and Ayurveda. And I actually work with a functional MD as well through Genius Network. Shout out to Huli Loroca, who is my functional MD kind of health coach. And tell me a bit about that process of mixing the two and finding a middle ground that works for you.
Well, the cool thing about naturopathic medicine is it's the style of medicine that's been around for even before medical doctors. In fact, the medicine that was practiced in the United States and the rest of the world was naturopathic medicine. And prior to that, it was, Ayurveda in Chinese medicine. And and then the discovery of the antibiotic occurred, and then it created, the standard medical system that we have now, because now we have a pill for an ill versus lifestyle changes, and people prefer to swallow pills versus making lifestyle changes. So the business took off, and antibiotics were effective and are effective. So, but we can't use a pill for everything. That's the problem. That's what we keep trying to do. Just like this stupid coronavirus, we think that we're going to attack it with a vaccine versus just natural health approaches and common sense. So I would say that naturopathic medicine, you take from it what you want. It's so, like you said, it's so diverse, so broad, so all encompassing that you're really kind of lost as a student, because you don't really know what you want to study until you kind of immerse yourself and get excited about something. We learned Ayurveda. I learned Chinese medicine. I learned nutrition. I learned pharmacology. I learned histology and anatomies and biochem and, minor surgery and emergency medicine. And I mean, you learn everything. And it's solid training. It was the hardest 5 years of my life, in terms of academia. And then I eventually learned that I really, really enjoyed nutritional biochemistry. I just got it. It just made sense to me. And then I utilized that with environmental medicine, and it just was a powerful combination.
So tell us a bit about your practice today, the business that you are currently in, just as a jumping off point for the rest of the conversation. What do you do for the patients that you treat?
Well, I no longer see patients, Jonathan, because when I was working with people, in the beginning, I helped them get better, and it was great. It felt very rewarding, and and then your patients get harder and harder and harder. And then as you take harder patients on and you get them better, then all their friends are also really sick, right? So then you start getting the patients who are almost impossible to treat. And I realized I was taking their money, but I wasn't gaining success in helping them. And they were compliant as all get out. They were super compliant. Compliance can be an issue. That's why a lot of people don't get better. But these individuals were compliant. They were doing everything as directed. They were researching on their own. They were coming to me with possible solutions. They were motivated, and I just couldn't help them. So I just closed shop, because basically everyone I worked with was this way. And so I dove back into the research, and I tried figuring out why would this particular supplement like glutathione help this person and make these types of people worse? Why would NADH really give some types of people a ton of energy and make these people super fatigued? So I would look at the nutritional biochemistry and dive down into figuring out why some people do this and why people do that. And then it led to me understanding genetics more, because genes perform work and jobs in the body. And if some of these genes aren't functioning properly, or they're born a bit faster or slower at various tasks, that's important to know. So that's what I do nowadays is I learn what jobs genes do, what tools they need to perform them, what inhibits them from performing those jobs, and what other genes do they need to help support each other. So, because genes are a team, one gene doesn't do everything. There's about 18,000 of them. So then I come up with pathways and diagrams and maps, and I discuss how the environment influences genes. And I don't look at genes that are deadly. I don't look at genetic defects that if you have this gene, you're going to die in 5 years. Those are not empowering. So your word is empowering. That is exactly what my job is every single day. I look at genetic variations that are very common in the population, across most populations. East Asians, Chinese, Hispanics, Caucasians, African Americans. They're prevalent across multiple ancestries, ethnic groups, and then they make an impact on how the gene functions. And then I look at how the gene wants to function, and then I give insights to people how they can optimize their specific genetic function, and it works. First, it was all theory, because you read the research saying, mycotoxins inhibit glutathione production, or when you take too much glutathione, it can lead to sulfites and wheezing and asthma issues and irritability and anxiety. And you start talking about these things and teaching doctors and giving solutions like, well, use molybdenum to take the sulfites out, and you should be able to tolerate the glutathione better. People start applying that, it give you feedback. It's like, oh, that really worked. So what I do is I come up with a lot of theories. People apply them. Either they work or they don't work. And I make note, and I just keep getting success, building upon success. Even if there's failure after failure in the beginning, at the end, there will be success.
That's really interesting. And before we hit record, you told me how your business, you first started out training and teaching and informing doctors, and then you kind of pivoted towards training end consumers. Tell me a bit about that, because it would seem as though the stuff you're talking about would be way over the average consumer's head.
Yes, and you're right. And genetics is, not to use words stupidly, but it is a new frontier. It is. Honestly, nobody knows how to properly utilize genetics in practice. I mean, I just read an article yesterday that the number one, I'll get to your question in a second, the number one boon in genetics right now is ordered by women who are pregnant because they want to look at the genetics of their baby before it's even born. And they basically just kind of want to know the sex right away. And you can do that with a genetic test quickly versus waiting for the ultrasound. You can save like 2 months off, which is, so that's kind of what they're doing. But at the end of the day, you get the results back, and then you're looking at a genetic counselor, and they're staring at you with this straight, stone cold face, and you're like, oh crap, did you find something else? What's the gender of my baby? Oh well, your baby might have Huntington's chorea, or your baby might be 30 times more likely to have uterine cancer, or your baby might have decreased stature and very short. And so you walk away disempowered, fearful, and the baby, meanwhile, is getting reduced blood flow because the mom is stressed. The mom is also creating huge amounts of stress neurotransmitters, which the baby is being bathed in, which is informing the baby that, the environment that I'm going to be born into is a stressful environment. I better be ready for that and amp up my ability to be acutely aware and responsive to stress. So it's programming the baby in a negative way. So I think women who are doing these preconception tests, or not preconception tests, but pregnancy tests looking at genetics of the baby should stop. But the reason I did pivot, because when I was studying this, I felt that it was complicated. It is complicated. And I felt that the best approach would be if I would teach 350 or more doctors at once in a room, that would blossom out and work with, say 300 doctors times 8, we could do 2,500 patients a day. I could get, help with, average of 8 patients a day, 300 doctors. I could help, 3,000 people a day. That's pretty cool. So I wanted to amplify and be efficient. The problem is when you're a naturopathic doctor, you kind of have an inferiority complex where you have to prove yourself that you know your crap. And so I walked in there and half the room was medical doctors, and the other half was a blend. It was, DCs, NDs, DOs, acupuncturists, Ayurveda. I mean, it was the whole gamut, but a ton of MDs. And I'm standing in the front of the room as the main lecturer for 2.5 days, the only lecturer, and I was throwing fastballs at 105 miles an hour to people who knew the sport of baseball but couldn't swing and hit any type of ball. I blew them away with the difficulty of biochemistry and nutrigenomics. And then after years of gradually toning it down, I realized I was teaching the health professionals at the exact same level as the general public. So I figured I could actually help health professionals by teaching the general public more about the importance of daily fundamentals, why you should be drinking filtered water, why you should be eating organic foods, why you should not be using Roundup in your yard, why you should go to bed on time and not utilize blue light, why these particular genes can increase your susceptibility to infection or detox issues or irritability or anxiety. So then they go to the health professionals who also have this training. They're more compliant, they're more educated, and they're ready and willing to get better.
So your ideal client is someone who really wants to learn this for themselves.
Yes, and that's it. And I'm very clear. In fact, we're coming out with a genetic test at the end of this month, and I have right in the top 5 frequently asked questions: is stratagine right for me? And I basically say stratagine is not for those who are looking for easy answers. It's looking for the people who want to be able to think and reason and work hard at improving themselves and optimizing their life. If you are looking for a genetic test that's just going to spit out a supplement bottle that's unique to your genetics, that's a bunch of hogwash and nonsense. It doesn't work. You'll just be frustrated. or B, it'll just tell you exactly what you need to do in life. That's also nonsense. So it is only for people who are committed to wanting to learn.
What are the types of things that someone might be looking to learn? I mean, I think the very basic DNA tests at this point, or genetic tests, will kind of tell you, what you are. I'm blanking on the word in English, like what you're a carrier for, and what you're not a carrier for. What are some of these like nitty gritty things that your ideal customer would want to look for?
I want them to see a more whole picture. So a lot of genetic reports report back genes like you have MTHFR, you have these variants on it, it's reduced in function, you could have high homocysteine. Okay. Here's another genetic variant you have, COMT. It's you have this variant. It might lead to irritability, insomnia, high estrogen, and estrogen-related cancers. Crap. Okay. And they report it back as homozygous, or you don't have a normal variant. Or if you do have a normal variant, let's say you get your genetic test back. Let's flip this around. That you do have an MTHFR variant and it's normal, or your MTHFR gene, it's tested and it's normal, a quote unquote normal. And then you have your COMT gene, there's no genetic variations there either. It's also quote unquote normal. And you look at genetic tests and you think immediately, oh, I'm fine. And that's wrong. You have to understand that genes are constantly responding to the environment. And you can have an MTHFR gene not working very well if you're hypothyroid or you're hyperthyroid or you're vitamin B2 or riboflavin deficient. Your COMT gene could not have any variants at all as well, but you could be deficient in magnesium. You could be having high estrogen from plastics in the environment. So you could be obese and driving a lot more estrogen as well. So there's all these things that you have to know. And I want people to know that you don't just have a genetic variation or you don't. Genetic testing should not just be, here's a variation that you have or you don't have. And by the way, these are bad, these are good, and these are not so much you need to worry about. I don't think genetic testing should do that. I think genetic testing should say, hey, here are some genes that you have. These ones that you have are commonly found among people in your population. Here are some genes that you have that are not so common in the population. They're not bad. They're different. And these are how they function. And by the way, these are the environmental influences on these particular genes. And these genes also communicate with all these other genes at the same time. So it's important for you to understand how these 20 genes work together. And we map that out for you versus a one-shot gene approach.
Wow. So really nitty gritty in the weeds for people who really want to take it to the next level of their understanding. I definitely understand what you're saying by throwing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs.
Yeah. And let me put it this way. I hear that skiing is easier to learn, but harder to get really good at. I hear that snowboarding is a bit to learn, but a lot easier to get good at. So I would equate that standard genetic reports that are on the market are for skiers. Stratagene is for people who want to learn how to snowboard. I'm a skier. Okay, I'm a skier. But I want people to really, really want to do it. They really want to do the sport. They know it's going to suck in the beginning. But once they get the basics, when they can stand up and they learn how to get on their edge and do all the basic stuff, it's going to be smooth riding right through after that the rest of their life. But it's going to suck in the beginning. You're going to hit your butt. You're going to have lots of bruises. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to be, why am I doing this? And then one of the days you're just going to get it. It's going to click. And you're like, God, I'm glad I stuck with it.
Hey, listen up and don't skip over this. Before we get started, I want to let you know that I am giving away completely free copies of my latest best-selling book, The Only Skill That Matters. This book is going to teach you how to upgrade your memory, read faster, learn more, and conquer your dreams. And it contains all new content written for 2020. Now, again, I am giving away completely free copies of this book. All you need to do is pay shipping and handling. So to pick up your free copy as a listener of this podcast, visit freelearningbook.com. That's freelearningbook.com. Now, you did mention, you talked about making the changes and that it is not so simple, that there is really quite a lot going on in changing our genetic expression. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask, where the rubber meets the road. What are some of the things when you're doing all this research that you've done and that you continue to do? What are some of the things that stand out for you? Again, we're talking to an audience of many thousands of people across different genetic populations in different geographies, in different age groups, in different everythings. But what are some of the things that stand out to you that are impactful changes people can practically make to improve their genetic expression and therefore their health outcomes?
Well, let me lead with this. And when I discussed what I was doing to the top researcher in the world in this area, Dr. Robert Navio, who researches at University of San Diego, and he also wrote the first prescription for the whole genome testing for the first president and CEO of Illumina, who is the largest genetic testing company in the world. So this guy knows his stuff. And when he told me, he goes, Ben, A, I love what you're doing, and B, what you are reporting back to people are what we call EcoAlleles. And I was like, it's interesting. My landscape company was called Eco Integration. I just thought of that. I never put the two together. So an EcoAllele is a genetic variation that has been selected for. It's been selected for to enhance the life of that particular individual in that particular environment at that particular time. Make sense?
Perfect sense.
Jonathan, are you living where your ancestors came from right now?
50% of my ancestors, yes.
Okay.
The other half were in Europe, but I am the rare case that my ancestors were here many thousands of years ago in the Levant, which is now modern day Israel.
Yeah, and how are you doing in that environment?
I'm happier here than I am in other environments.
Yeah.
50% of me is really happy. The other 50% of me is sunburned.
Yeah.
The European half is sunburned.
Yeah, so hence my point. My parents are my ancestors are, and we have to look at ancestors because genes do not evolve quickly, right? We're not bacteria, so we're not changing very, very fast. So my ancestors came from England, Ireland, Bavaria, and I'm in Seattle. It's somewhat similar. But I thrive when I'm in Russia for some reason. So who knows? But the bottom line is we're not typically in the environment that we've been selected for, that our genes have been selected for. So then we're constantly fighting against our genes. So if you know what your genes are and what it takes to nourish them and what it takes to piss them off, and you have that sitting in front of you, then you can make lifestyle decisions that can really cater to your genes. Let me give you a concrete example because you wanted to know what people could do about this. So there was an individual who posted on my Strategy and Facebook group a really good question. I've been anxious my entire life. I ordered Strategy because I want to evaluate and see if my genes are predisposing me in increasing my susceptibility to anxiety, or is this a bunch of nonsense? I looked at her genes because she posted them in the group, and I looked at that. I was like, oh my God. I didn't say this, but wow. Yeah, you definitely have huge increased risk to anxiety. And then I private messaged her. I wrote her back, and we had communication going back and forth. And so she had huge amounts potential for dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine to stay at high levels in her brain, and her ability to get rid of them was not very good at all. So if she had a stressful situation, she would stay strung out. She had constant panic attacks and what have you. And then I worked with her, for free, just back and forth, just to see if I could help her. And it turned out that her husband worked in the oil fields, and she was constantly exposed to environmental exposures. And I forget what the particular exposure was xylene, I believe. Xylene can increase anxiety in a lot of people. So I told her that, and I looked up her zip code on a website. What's it called? I've been wanting to remember. But anyway, I typed in her zip code in this one website to see who the top polluters were in her environment. And everywhere she lived, she was exposed to huge amounts of xylene. In fact, her current location, she was the number one zip code in the nation for xylene exposure. And I told her the solution was to move and to get a xylene blood test and to take glycine, because glycine helps pull out xylene. But what I want people to hear from this is that while she was predisposed to anxiety with her genetic variations, I did not just say, you have these genetic variations, take these supplements. You have these genetic variations, eat this food. You have these genetic variations, do this, do that, do that. I did a pretty thorough history via Facebook Messenger, privately. And I discovered, this environmental exposure. So I want people to understand that history comes first, and environment is a major, major role for this. So I want people's environment to be as healthy as they can make it. So Jonathan, when you and I before we got on air here, I noticed that you were in a amazingly beautifully set up sound room, but it looked like you're in a black box with padding. And I was like, dude, that's got to suck for vitamin D and all that. You're like, yes, but I have a huge window that you cannot see. The sunlight's shining in on my face, and I've got blue light screens and blue light blocking glasses. So There you go. Well done.
That's what I get for 265 episodes, right? At least I learned a thing or two, right?
Yeah, and that's what life is. You're constantly learning, and the problem is with all these podcasts and social media and in Google, you can learn the wrong things, and you have to be willing to unlearn and learn again. So I love how Jim Quick says that the first step to learning anything is to unlearn everything. And, he said it better than I did, and I probably botched that a little bit, and he's going to want to correct me. But I just really thought that was a really prudent point. So a lot of people get defensive. They're like, oh, I learned it this way, and that's fine. But I there's so much misinformation on the internet, and most of my time is spent reversing that misinformation around genetics, and it sucks because what I really try to do is to provide accurate information. The stuff that I look at is all cited. Strategene has thousands of citations. We don't make claims or just randomly. It comes from published research.
Are there, within that, I mean, it sounds to me what I'm hearing is people really need to listen to their genes and figure out what specifically works for them and their genetic makeup. But within that, the contrarian in me wants to ask, are there things that you found in your work that just about everyone should be doing?
Yeah, the fundamentals across the board. I would say the number one thing, take a vacation.
Ooh, that's a good one. Not enough people say that on this show.
Yeah. Number one, watch the movie What About Bob? What was the prescription? Bill Murray was like, no, I don't need more, this medication. I don't need more medication. And the psychiatrist like, no. I know. Just got it. And he wrote out a script pad. He goes, well, I don't need this med. I'm just like, just quiet. And he handed Bill Murray, the prescription. And Bill Murray held it in both hands, looked at it, and said, "Take a vacation."
Yeah.
And
Totally.
Bob was like, "Oh my God, this is the best. This is the best prescription I've ever had since Prozac, since whatever," right? And it was hilarious. Amazing movie. Got to watch it, but you got to take a vacation, because if you don't take, and I mean a vacation, I'm not talking about flying to your in-laws or your sisters or your cousins or your kids' place. I mean a vacation, something that you really want to do, not something that you feel compelled or that you need to be committed to do, that you really want to do. Do you want to go jet skiing in the Bahamas? Do you want to go skydiving? Do you want to just go sit on the beach and do nothing and just burn? Whatever it is, do you want to go to Las Vegas and gamble and drink? That's not ideal, but, get it out of your system. Go for it. I just really want people to live how they want to live. And you have to find out what that is, and you have to tune into it, and you have to identify what your core values are. But taking a vacation, I think, is key. And I did not do that enough. And even if you don't have any money at all, you're like totally busted. If you're too sick to move or too sick to do something, pull yourself out of your routine and do something outside of your routine.
Bingo.
That's it.
Parks are free, people. There's a park in your city or neighborhood, and it is free. And you can go, and the sunshine is free too. And they're both really good for you.
Yep. And just watching animals I love watching the squirrels and the ducks. And, sometimes I'll just sit and I'll watch an animal or even an insect. I would do this as a kid, and I just sit there, and it felt like hours. And I would try to learn how they're communicating, learn what they're trying to do. And it was so peaceful and relaxing, just sitting there trying to, understand them more.
I like that a lot. That was a really good one. So I'm going to ask the question again. Do you have any other surprising things that everyone should be doing and what I love about it is you come at that, it sounds so casual, so nonchalant, but you come at it from the perspective of like, your genes will bring out the worst in you if you do not take a vacation. It is literally scientifically proven advice. So do you have any more of those?
Yeah. Breathe through your nose, not your mouth.
Really? Tell me more.
So air is needed everywhere in your body. Oxygenation is needed. And you also have this compound called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide helps your blood vessels relax and get bigger, and allow more blood to flow. Are your hands and feet cold right now? Okay.
Mine
so as you're
not.
listening to this, tune into yourself. It's like, oh yeah, my hands are always freezing. Or at this moment, usually my hands are warm, but at this moment they're cold. My hands right now are warm. My feet are warm. But if I'm not doing things right, my hands and feet will be cold. And that means your nitric oxide synthase gene, your NOS3 gene, is not producing enough nitric oxide. When you breathe through your nose, for some reason, the air passage through your nose stimulates nitric oxide to be produced. So the NOS3 gene is working and is performing its job. When you breathe through your mouth, for some reason, the nitric oxide does not get made. It does not stimulate the NOS3 gene. Very weird. I don't know why. It's just how we're built. So, and if you're not making nitric oxide, you are not delivering vitamins and minerals to your cells, which they need. You're not delivering oxygen, which they need, and you are not eliminating the garbage that your cells are making, which they do. They're taking out the recycle and the trash on a second by second basis, like ammonia and formaldehyde and hydrogen peroxide and what have you. All that needs to be flushed out. So breathing through your nose is very important.
Wow,
and
that's a really good one.
Yeah.
That's such a good one that I might just go for broke and see if we can pull off a hat trick. Do you have a third one?
Yeah.
No,
third
but
one, I did.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. I would say that avoid. So avoidance is way more powerful than dealing with the aftermath. And that can be avoidance of so many different things. It could be avoidance of watching the news about the coronavirus.
Oh my goodness, right? Yes.
What's that doing to people? Imagine the fear and paranoia that is triggering their genes to produce more anxiety neurotransmitters in the compounds that are all associated with that. So avoidance of negativity, avoidance of extra work, avoidance of chemicals, because what happens when you are not avoiding things is all that input, whether it's visual, auditory, touch, smell, taste, doesn't matter. All that input requires your genes to work. So genes have jobs to do, and any stimulus you put in requires them to work, and your genes are not on vacation. They become overworked, and as genes work, they need vitamins and minerals, and they need other things as well, and you're going to wear them out. And as you wear them out, they're going to call on their coworker gene and say, hey, man, I'm slammed here. Ben is just slamming me with this stupid news here, and I'm just freaking out. Can you take up the slack? And they're like, sure, I'll take up the slack. And now they get overworked. The body has numerous alternative routes and supportive routes. There's not just one pathway for things to get done in the human body. There's numerous routes that have backup plans and another backup and another backup. But eventually, these backup routes all get plugged. It's like trying to drive during rush hour. You just can't get through no matter what street you take. But if you take go to a different time, this street might be blocked, but you can get around and Siri can find you a better route. But just remember, I just always want people to remember that genes do work, and you're the one who's giving them the work to do.
That's really, really sound advice. I'm really glad. I've never asked a question 3 times in a row, but it's like the exercise Ben Hardy always talks about. It's like if you ask why 5 times, the answer you get is so profound. Yes. Now, I know we've pretty much come up on time here. In fact, we've gone over the time I said we would take. I do want to give you an opportunity. You have a new book coming out. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, my publisher would love to have that true. They've been hounding me for a next book. But the book that I wrote, Dirty Genes, the paperback got published. So that's new.
Awesome.
And it's killing it. It's in multiple languages, and you can find it on Amazon or bookstores everywhere, or even airports if you are so brave to fly right now.
Right.
But
I really hope that by the time this airs, coronavirus is not a thing. But on the other hand, it could be that by the time this airs, there's no one out there listening.
Yeah, that would be good.
And Dr. Lynch, where can people reach out and learn more about all the stuff that you're doing and check out this awesome new genetic test strategy that you've been working on?
Yeah, well, I've been really, really loving social media lately, because what I do what I love about social media is I get feedback from people real time, because I do a lot of live things, right? And I actually respond to people's comments. I don't post and go. So people ask really good questions, which helps direct my research and learn where people are stuck and where I haven't done a good job in explaining things. So finding me on Instagram at Dr. Ben Lynch, or Facebook, same thing, you're going to learn a lot. And people love following me. My kids say my feed sucks. Dad, your Instagram feed is so hideous. But I don't care. The information's good.
Nice.
Yeah, go ahead.
Nice. No, that is fantastic. So we will put all those links into the blog post. And before I let you go, I asked a little bit about your word at the beginning, but I do want to ask, if people take one big message, we covered so much in this episode, but if they take one big message from having been exposed to you here today, what would you hope for that message to be?
Remember the power of the fundamentals. And the fundamentals are, like in any sport, you got to know how to pass the ball, dribble the ball in basketball. You got to know how to hold the bat in baseball. You got to know how to put the mitt on and catch a ball in baseball. Don't try to learn plays in basketball. Don't try to go for broke. You got to learn that the fundamentals of breathing, chewing your food, avoiding chemicals, avoiding negativity, bringing in positivity, taking your vacations, the fundamentals are key. And I'll leave with this. So I presented at a conference in Canada, and the guy was, they were all listening. And at the end of my talk, this doctor, this older gentleman, probably in his late 70s, stood up, walked over to me, and he goes, "Thank you." I said, "You're welcome." He goes, "No, really, thank you." I said, "Okay." And he goes, "What I want to share with you is that you are really demonstrating scientifically the importance of naturopathic medicine and the importance of everyday fundamentals on genetic expression. And it's beautiful because you are reinforcing how powerful the basics are in life at such a high scientific level that it cannot be refuted. So thank you." And I was like, wow, yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm learning that the basics really, really matter, Jonathan.
And I feel like it's just worth clarifying. The basics are sleep, nutrition, exercise, sunlight, social bonds. Anything else I missed there?
Everything that people already knew and know that they're not doing.
Yep. You were in the room with me when the gentleman, VC, said, "The hack is that there is no hack." I think if you listen to the last 270 or so episodes of this show, there are lots of hacks, but the big hack is that, and some of them are great hacks, by the way. Breathing through your nose, that is a great hack that I just learned today. But some of them, the hack is that there's no hack. Like, go to bed an hour early tonight, wake up tomorrow, have a kick-ass breakfast without sugar. You will just feel so much better.
Yeah, you will. I have such a hard time with that word hack, because if you're a hack skier, you get down the mountain, but you just suck. You know, you make it, you don't fall, but you're just not, it's not graceful. And you know, I could just be having a negative connotation with this word, but breathing through your nose is how we're designed to breathe. You know, really. So the mouth is to input food and water and you know, spit and vomit. And so, and kiss after I said vomit. That's nice.
Right. Dr. Lynch, this has been such a pleasure. I appreciate your generosity of spirit and time. And I look forward to seeing you, hopefully, in one of the Genius Network meetings if people don't stop traveling.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, my conference just got canceled. So,
oh no.
But it's cool. I mean, I was speaking at a conference here in Seattle, and it looks like it's going to be canceled. But yeah, anyhow, it's a great question, Jonathan. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Talk soon.
Yep.
Thanks for tuning in to the award-winning Superhuman Academy podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit superhuman.blog. While you're at it, please take a moment to share this episode with a friend and leave us a review on iTunes. We'll see you next week.